The garage door rattled like a dying animal as my father and uncle burst through it, their boots stomping mud across the concrete floor, faces twisted in a storm fiercer than the one raging outside. "Jamie, what the hell is this?" Dad's voice cracked like lightning, holding up my phone, the screen glowing with texts from Malcolm that I'd never meant for anyone to see. I spun around from the workbench, heart slamming against my ribs, the wrench slipping from my hand and clanging to the ground, because in that split second, I knew my world had just shattered into pieces that no amount of Midwestern grit could glue back together. I'd always been the good son in Elmwood, Ohio, the one who fixed cars on weekends, mowed lawns for the neighbors, and dreamed of escaping to some big city where secrets didn't suffocate you like the humid summer air. At 22, I was still crashing in the basement of our split-level ranch house, saving up for community college tuition while working shifts at the auto parts store downtown. "Dad, Malcolm, wait, no, that's not right. My father's name is Harlan, a name as solid and unyielding as the steel mill he retired from last year after 35 years welding beams that held up half of Cleveland's skyline." Harlan Whitaker, with his calloused hands and perpetual squint from staring into welding torches, was the epitome of straight-arrow Americana. Steelers fan, VFW regular, the guy who'd grill burgers at block parties and quote Reagan like gospel. He raised me alone after Mom skipped out when I was 8, leaving behind nothing but a stack of unpaid bills and a closet full of her old dresses that I sometimes snuck into just to feel like she hadn't vanished entirely. Then there was Uncle Bryce, Dad's older brother by 3 years, the wild card in our deck. Bryce lived 2 blocks over in a double-wide trailer parked on a weed-choked lot, the kind of place that screamed forgotten promise, with its rusted truck out front and Christmas lights strung up year-round because he could never be bothered to take them down. He was the uncle who taught me to fish at Mosquito Lake, who'd sneak me beers at family reunions and spin yarns about his glory days in the Marines. Tales that always ended with a punchline and a backslap that left you grinning through the ache. Bryce was straight as they come, or so everyone thought. Divorced twice, a string of girlfriends who came and went like seasons, and a laugh that could fill a room but never quite reached his eyes. He and Dad were oil and water. Harlan the steady rock, Bryce the rolling stone. But blood kept them tethered, especially after Mom left, when Bryce stepped in as the fun uncle who made sure I didn't turn into some emo kid blasting Nirvana in the garage. Our family wasn't big on words. We communicated in grunts over dinner, nods across the driveway, the occasional atta-boy when I aced a carburetor rebuild. Love was in the doing. Dad teaching me to change oil before I could drive, Bryce showing me how to skip stones across the Cuyahoga just right so they'd kiss the water 3 times before sinking. But beneath that blue-collar armor, I carried my own secret, one that gnawed at me like rust on an old fender. I was gay, had known it since high school, when I'd stare too long at the quarterback in the locker room showers, my stomach twisting with a hunger I couldn't name. I'd buried it deep, dating girls like Sarah from the diner just to keep up appearances, but it leaked out in stolen glances and late-night scrolls through apps I deleted every morning. Malcolm changed everything. I met him 6 months ago at the auto shop, a transfer from the Cincinnati branch, all lean muscle and quiet intensity, with hazel eyes that seemed to see right through the grease on my hands. He was 24, fresh out of trade school, with a tattoo of a compass rose on his forearm that he said reminded him to always find true north. We bonded over busted transmissions and bad coffee from the break room machine, trading stories about growing up in the Rust Belt. Him from Akron, me from Elmwood, both of us chasing dreams that felt just out of reach. One rainy afternoon, after closing up shop, he leaned over the hood of my '89 Camaro, his shoulder brushing mine, and said, "You ever feel like you're fixing everyone else's rides but your own life's stuck in neutral?" That's when it hit me he got it. The isolation, the itch to bolt. Our first kiss happened behind the shop, under the flickering sodium lights, his lips tasting like spearmint gum and possibility. It was tentative at first, then desperate, like we'd both been holding our breath for years. From there, it bloomed in secret. Picnics at the Metroparks, drives along the lakefront where we'd park and talk until the stars came out, his hand finding mine in the dark. Malcolm wasn't out either. His folks were old-school Polish Catholics who crossed themselves at the mention of anything alternative. We were careful, deleting messages, using code words like "parts run" for meetups. But love like that doesn't stay caged forever. Claws its way out, and on that stormy Tuesday in July, it did. The texts Dad found? They were from last night, after Malcolm dropped me off post-shift. Can't stop thinking about your laugh. Makes me want to drive to Chicago right now. Just you and me. Innocent enough, but in Harlan Whitaker's world, they might as well have been a confession scrawled in blood. I must have left my phone on the workbench while tinkering with the lawnmower. Stupid. Careless. Now here they were, Harlan and Bryce, looming like thunderheads. The air thick with the scent of wet earth and impending doom. "Jamie, talk to me," Dad said, his voice dropping from thunder to a low rumble, the phone trembling in his fist. His face was a map of creases I'd never noticed before. Worry lines etched deep from years of overtime shifts and silent grief over Mom. Bryce hung back, arms folded, his usual smirk replaced by something unreadable, like he'd swallowed a stone. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. The rain hammered the roof, drowning my pulse. It's not what you think," I stammered, the lie tasting like ash. "Not what you think." Who was I kidding? It was exactly what they thought, and the weight of it pinned me in place. Bryce stepped forward then, his boots scraping the floor. "Kid, we've known for a while." His words hung there, simple as a socket wrench, but they exploded in my chest. "Known? How? When?" My mind raced back. The extra time at the shop, the flush on my cheeks after Malcolm's texts, the way I'd started humming old Springsteen tunes that Bryce always blasted on his truck radio. They'd seen it all, pieced it together without me saying a word. Harlan thrust the phone at me, his eyes, those steel blue eyes that had stared down Foreman and fixed every broken thing in our lives, now glassy with something that looked like betrayal. "This Malcolm kid, he's the one, isn't he? The parts guy you won't shut up about." It wasn't a question. He knew. I snatched the phone, shoving it in my pocket, my throat closing up. "Dad, please. It's not. Save it." He cut me off, turning away, his shoulders hunching like the Harlan who'd come home from Nam with shrapnel scars he never talked about. "I need a minute." He stormed out into the rain, the door slamming behind him with a finality that echoed in my bones. Bryce stayed, his presence filling the garage like exhaust fumes. He ran a hand through his salt-streaked hair, exhaling slow. "Harlan's not mad at you, Jamie. He's mad at himself. For not seeing it sooner. For hell. For everything." There was a hitch in his voice, a crack in the uncle armor I'd idolized since I was knee-high. I sank onto a milk crate, the fight draining out of me. "What now? You gonna tell the whole damn town?" "Entrito? The guys at the VFW?" He chuckled, but it was hollow, like wind through a hollow tree. "Nah, this stays here. But kid, you gotta come clean. To him. To yourself." He clapped a hand on my shoulder, the grip firm but not crushing, and for the first time, I saw the weariness in his eyes, the same shadows that haunted Dad after a long shift. That night, I lay in the basement, staring at the exposed pipes overhead, replaying the scene until it blurred. Malcolm texted again. "You okay? Storm knocked out power here." And I typed back lies about a flat tire, my fingers shaking. Sleep came in fits, dreams of Harlan's face morphing into Mom's, both of them walking away into the fog. By morning, the house felt like a tomb. Dad's coffee mug sat cold on the counter, Bryce's truck gone from the drive. I dragged myself to work, the shop a sanctuary of clanging metal and oil scents. But even there, Malcolm's easy smile felt like a grenade pin half pulled. We stole moments in the back bay, his whisper against my ear. "Whatever's eating you, spill it. We're in this together." I wanted to. God, how I wanted to. But the words stuck, tangled in fear of losing him too. Instead, I buried it under hoods and invoices, the secret festering like a bad weld. Weeks blurred into a tense standoff. Dad and I moved like ghosts. Him in the garage tinkering alone, me avoiding his eyes over microwave dinners of Stouffer's lasagna. Bryce bridged the gap, showing up with six-packs and excuses, just checking on the boy. But his small talk about the Browns' lousy season grated, a reminder of the elephant in the room. One evening, after Dad bailed on our ritual Friday night poker game, Bryce cornered me on the porch, the fireflies winking like conspirators in the yard. "Harlan's hurting, Jamie. Thinks he failed you. Raised you wrong." He lit a smoke, the cherry glowing orange in the twilight. "Back in the day after your ma left, we made a pact, me and him, to keep you straight and narrow no matter what. Ironclad. Like those beams he welded." The word straight landed like a sucker punch. "And now? What? I'm the crack in the foundation." Bryce stubbed out the cigarette, his jaw tightening. "Nah, you're the goddamn cornerstone. But Harlan, he's stuck in the 80s, kid. Thinks love's a battlefield. And this is enemy territory to him." He paused, staring out at the streetlights flickering on. "Give him time, or don't. But don't let it eat you alive." His words lingered, a lifeline in the dark. The next day at work, Malcolm pulled me aside during lunch, his compass tattoo peeking from his sleeve. "Jamie, you're fading on me. Talk." Under the relentless Ohio sun, filtered through the shop's grimy windows, I broke. The whole ugly spill. The phone, the confrontation, the silence that stretched like the empty highway to Pittsburgh. He listened, no judgment, just his hand steady on mine. "Then we fight for it," he said, fierce as a spark plug firing. Together. Emboldened, I confronted Dad that weekend. Bryce had primed the pump, dragging Harlan to the lake for a fishing trip that was really just beers and brutal honesty. I found him in the garage, elbow deep in the Camaro's engine, the radio murmuring Merle Haggard. "Dad," I started, voice steadier than I felt. "About the texts. Malcolm, it's real. He's real. To me." He didn't look up, wiping grease on a rag. "I know, son. Bryce told me you two are serious." The pause was a chasm. "Doesn't make it easy." "Why not?" The question burst out, raw. "You love me. Isn't that enough?" Harlan straightened, his eyes meeting mine. Tired, but clear. "Love's never enough when fear's in the mix. Fear of losing you. Fear of what the neighbors say. Hell, fear of admitting I don't know how to fix this." He tossed the rag aside, vulnerability cracking his voice. "Your ma. She left because I couldn't bend. Wouldn't. And now, with you." The admission hung there, a bridge over the abyss. I stepped closer, the air humming with unsaid things. "You didn't fail me, Dad. But pushing me away, that would." We stood like that, the engine ticking cool, until Bryce's truck rumbled up the drive. He hopped out, cooler in hand, playing it casual. "Brought perch. Figured we could fry 'em up, talk like men." But his glance said volumes. This is it. The turning point. Over dinner that night, fish crispy from the cast iron, coleslaw from the deli. The dam broke. Stilted at first, then tumbling. Dad sharing stories from the mill, guys who'd lost everything to the bottle or bad choices, how he'd vowed not to let that touch me. Bryce chiming in with his own ghosts, divorces that weren't just about irreconcilable differences, but about hiding parts of himself he couldn't face. Wait, hiding? The word snagged. As plates cleared, Bryce leaned back, beer in hand, his face shadowed by the kitchen light. "Truth is, Jamie, your old man's not the only one scared of bending." He set the bottle down, deliberate. "Back in the core, Nom. Things happen. Bonds form. Ones you don't talk about over stateside barbecues." His eyes flicked to Harlan, a silent current passing between them. "Harlan and me, we kept each other alive over there. More than brothers in ways we'd never admit." The room tilted. Dad's fork clattered, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he nodded, slow, like unburdening a rucksack. "He's right. We were kids, scared shitless. But it saved us. And when we came home, we buried it. Married women we half-loved, built lives on straight lines. Because that's what America demanded. What we thought it took to be men." My heart thundered, pieces slotting into place. The pact, the overprotectiveness, the way they'd always hovered, fierce and unspoken. Not judgment, protection. From the world that had scarred them. But you, Dad said, reaching across the table, his hand rough on mine. You don't have to bury a damn thing. Not with us. Not anymore. Tears blurred the Formica tabletop, hot and unashamed. Bryce raised his bottle. To true north, he toasted, echoing Malcolm's ink. And in that moment, the Whitaker men, flawed, forged in fire, chose grace over grit. It wasn't perfect, wasn't a parade down Main Street, but it was ours. A quiet revolution in an Elmwood kitchen, where love finally outran the fear. The days after that kitchen confessional unfolded like a slow thaw after a brutal Midwest winter. Tentative, with patches of ice still lurking underfoot, but sunlight breaking through more each hour. Dad started small. A nod when Malcolm swung by to borrow a socket set. His eyes lingering not in suspicion, but curiosity, like sizing up a new hire at the mill. Good grip on that wrench, kid? He'd grunt, and Malcolm would flash that disarming grin. The one that made my knees weak, replying with some shop talk that had even Harlan chuckling. Bryce, ever the catalyst, invited us all to a Browns tailgate. Him and Dad in their faded orange jerseys. Malcolm and me tagging along with coolers of pop and brats sizzling on a portable grill. It was awkward at first, the roar of the crowd masking our stilted chatter, but by halftime, with the score tied and foam fingers waving, Dad slung an arm around my shoulders during a field goal attempt. Proud of you, son, he murmured, the words lost in the cheer but landing square in my chest. Malcolm fit into the cracks like he'd always been there, his quiet strength a counterpoint to the Whitaker bluster. We'd steal away during commercial breaks, leaning against the truck bed, his fingers tracing lazy circles on my palm. Your family's intense, he'd say, half laughing, but his eyes shone with something deeper, relief, maybe, that my world hadn't imploded. Like a pack of wolves who finally stopped growling. I kissed him then, quick and fierce under the stadium lights, tasting victory sweeter than any touchdown. But peace in Elmwood was fragile, built on the same fault lines that cracked the old steel plants. The betrayal came swift and sharp. A knife slipped between ribs by someone you trusted with your spine. It started with whispers at the shop. Guys who'd overheard Malcolm and me joking too close, or maybe seen us pull away from a parts run with rumpled shirts. Small-town radar, tuned to anything that deviated from the script. Then Aunt Rita, Dad's sister, the family busybody with her perm and prayer chain, called one Sunday after church, her voice syrupy with concern. Harlan, honey, folks are talking about Jamie and that boy from the store. You hear anything? Dad hung up stone-faced, but I caught the tremor in his hand as he gripped the receiver. Bryce was there, nursing coffee at the Formica, and he slammed his mug down hard enough to slosh grounds across the saucer. That witch, stirring the pot again. Turns out, Rita had cornered Bryce at the Piggly Wiggly the week prior, fishing for dirt after spotting us at the tailgate. He'd brushed her off. Mind your beeswax, Rita. But she twisted it, spread it like gossip gospel to her bridge club and beyond. By Monday, the texts rolled in. Anonymous numbers with slurs that burned like battery acid. Freak, scrawled in Sharpie on my locker at work. The boss pulled me aside, awkward as a rusted hinge. No trouble here, Whitaker, but keep it professional, yeah? Malcolm bore the brunt, his transfer request suddenly under review. Whispers following him like exhaust. We fought about it in the parking lot after close. Rain slicking the asphalt, his face pale under the fluorescence. This is my fault, I said, punching the chain link fence until my knuckles split. Dragging you into my mess. Bullshit, he snapped, grabbing my collar, pulling me close enough to feel his breath hitch. We're not hiding anymore. Not for them. But doubt crept in, a shadow at the edges. His parents calling more, probing questions about that Whitaker boy. The weight of expectation pressing down. The real gut punch landed midweek, courtesy of Bryce. I'd gone to his trailer after a brutal shift, seeking the uncle who'd always had my back, the one who'd shared his own buried truths over perch and beer. He was on the couch, TV blaring some cop show rerun, a half-empty fifth of Jack on the coffee table. Uncle B, I started, sinking beside him. It's getting bad. The talk. Rita's poison spreading. He nodded, slow, avoiding my eyes. Yeah, heard it at the bar last night. Couple old mill hands jawing about Harlan's queer kid. The words slithered out, casual as a curse, and something in me recoiled. You believe that crap? Bryce finally looked at me, his face a storm front. Guilt and granite. Doesn't matter what I believe. Matters what I did. He reached for the bottle, but his hand shook. After Rita cornered me, I told her to back off. But she kept pushing. Said she'd tell the whole family about me and Harlan if I didn't. Confirm things. About you. The air sucked out of the room. You. What? Not everything. He rushed. But it was too late. The damage blooming like oil in water. Just enough to shut her up. That you and Malcolm are seeing each other. Figured she'd keep it quiet, family to family. But Rita, she's got a mouth like a storm drain. Betrayal hit like a backhand, hot and disorienting. Bryce, the uncle who'd confessed his own ghosts, who'd toasted to true north. He'd traded my secret for his? To protect the pact, the fragile peace he'd helped forge? You sold me out, I whispered, standing on legs gone wooden. For what? To keep your stories buried. His face crumpled, the tough guy mask shattering. Jamie, I panicked. Thought I was shielding us all, you, Harlan, me. But I fucked up. Royally. He reached out, but I jerked away. The trailer suddenly too small, too stale with regret. I bolted into the night, gravel crunching under my boots. The summer stars mocking me with their indifference. Drove to the lake, tires humming the blacktop, until I parked at our old fishing spot. The water lapping dark and restless. Malcolm met me there. I texted a SOS, and he came without question, sliding into the passenger seat with a thermos of coffee and that steady gaze. Talk, he said simply, and I did, the words pouring out in sobs that shook the Camaro's frame. Bryce's slip, Rita's venom, the town's turning tide. He held me through it, his arms a harbor in the gale, whispering, "You're not alone. Never were." We stayed till dawn, watching the sun gild the ripples, plotting our escape. Chicago, maybe, or Detroit, where the Rust Belt dreams didn't die so easy. But leaving meant ripping roots, abandoning Dad to the fallout alone. The climax brewed like a squall line on the horizon, breaking Friday at the VFW hall. Dad had dragged us there for bingo night. Family shows up, he'd insisted, his jaw set. But the air crackled with undercurrents, stares lingering too long on Malcolm and me as we claimed our table near the bar. Rita held court across the room, her laugh brittle as she leaned into a cluster of gray hairs, eyes darting our way. Bryce slunk in late, nursing a draft, his avoidance a neon sign. Halftime, or whatever they call intermission at bingo. Dad cornered Rita by the snack table, his voice low but carrying. You got a problem, sis? Spit it out here. The room hushed, daubers pausing midair. She straightened, chin high. The pearl necklace Mom had left her glinting like a noose. Problem? Harlan, it's the town talking. Your boys. Choices. And Bryce, of all people, confirming it. After what you two. Shut your mouth, Dad growled. But it was Bryce who surged forward, face ashen, slamming his glass down. The shatter echoed, drawing every eye. Enough, Rita. You want truths? Fine. Harlan and I. We weren't just brothers in Nam. We loved each other, saved each other. And when we came home, we hid it because vipers like you would have poisoned it all. Gasps rippled, chairs scraping as folks shifted, uncomfortable in the fluorescent glare. Rita's face drained of color, her hand fluttering to her throat. You. What? Lies. To cover for the boy. No lie, Dad interjected, stepping beside Bryce, their shoulders brushing in solidarity. And Jamie? He's got more courage in his pinky than we ever did. Loving who he loves out loud. We're done hiding. For him. For us. The hall fell silent, save for the hum of the ancient AC. Then old Mr. Kowalski from the mill clapped, slow and deliberate, followed by a murmur that swelled into applause. Not thunderous, but real, the kind earned in quiet defiance. Rita stormed out, her heels clicking fury, But the tide had turned, whispers shifting from venom to vague nods. Outside, under the sodium lamps, I hugged Dad fierce, his flannel damp with sweat and relief. "You didn't have to." "Had to," he cut in gruff. "For you, son. Always." Bryce hung back, eyes downcast, until I pulled him in, the three of us a knot against the world. "Forgive me?" he asked, voice rough. "Not yet," I said, but squeezed his arm. "But getting there." Malcolm watched from the truck, pride lighting his face, and as we drove home, windows down, radio crooning Dylan, I felt the chains loosen. Elmwood wasn't Eden, wouldn't wave rainbow flags down Maine, but it was home, and home, it turned out, could bend. Autumn crept into Elmwood like an old friend, reluctant but inevitable. Leaves turning the Cuyahoga's banks to fire, the air crisp with the promise of cider mills and high school football under Friday night lights. The VFW blowout had rippled outward, not a tsunami but a steady current, eroding the hard edges of judgment. Text still trickled in, anonymous barbs from cowards hiding behind burners, but they glanced off now, harmless as acorns underfoot. At the shop, the boss greenlit Malcolm's raise, muttering something about team players, and the guys started including us in their post-shift rituals. Darts at O'Malley's, where the owner poured free rounds for standing tall. Dad even hung a faded pride sticker on the Camaro's bumper, peeling at the edges but there, a quiet flag planted in Whitaker territory. Bryce and I rebuilt slow, like patching a fender after a scrape. He'd drop by the basement with takeout from the Greek joint, gyros wrapped in foil, extra tzatziki, and we really talk about the ghosts he'd wrestled since Dongha in '72. "Love don't come with a manual," he'd say, unwrapping his like a peace offering. "But regret? That's the devil's fine print." I shared too, the terror of that first kiss with Malcolm, the ache of hiding in plain sight. Forgiveness came in layers, not a flood. A shared laugh over a botched carb clean, a nod across the driveway that said more than sorry ever could. Malcolm and I deepened, our secret blooming into something sturdy, roots tangling in the everyday. Weekends became ours. Drives to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland, where we'd wander exhibits on Springsteen and the Replacements, his hand brushing mine amid the artifacts of rebellion. One October afternoon, fog rolling off Lake Erie like smoke from a mill stack, he pulled over at Edgewater Park, the city skyline a hazy silhouette. "Jamie," he said, turning to me with that compass-steady gaze. "I want forever, not just stolen moments. You, me, a garage apartment in Chicago, fixing rides and building something real." My throat tightened, the skyline blurring. "Yeah, even with the baggage? The Whitakers and their drama." He laughed, soft, pulling a keychain from his pocket. A tiny wrench engraved with our initials, JW plus M. "Baggage makes the load worth carrying. You're my true north, remember?" We kissed there, with the lake wind whipping and gulls crying overhead, sealing a pact of our own. No rings, no vows, just the raw vow of two Rust Belt boys choosing each other against the odds. But life, being the stubborn bastard it is, doesn't hand out tidy bows. Winter hit hard that year, blizzards burying Elmwood under feet of white, the kind that strands you with your thoughts and the ghosts you thought you'd outrun. Dad took a fall on the ice one January morning, slipping off the porch steps while salting the drive. Bryce found him, groaning in the snow, hip cracked like fine china. The ER in Akron was a fluorescent purgatory. Beeps and bleach, Harlan pale under the thin blanket, morphine dulling the pain but not the fear in his eyes. We rallied, Malcolm skipping shifts to drive, Bryce pacing the halls like a caged wolf, me holding Dad's hand, calluses rough against my palm. "Not going anywhere, son," he rasped, but the doctor's words hung heavy. Complications from the old shrapnel, pneumonia lurking in his lungs like an ambush. Nights blurred into vigils, vending machine coffee and stolen naps in vinyl chairs. The three of us, Whitakers plus one, weaving a fragile web of support. In the quiet hours, truths surfaced like frost on glass. Dad confessed more about Mom. Not just the leaving, but the fighting, her whispers about his cold spots. the walls he'd built post-war that no amount of affection could scale. "Thought I was protecting you from that," he said, voice a whisper. "From loving half measures." Bryce added his layer, admitting the divorces weren't failures of spark, but of silence. Women who'd sensed the chasm and jumped before it swallowed them whole. "We were cowards," he said, eyes on the snow-choked window. "But you, Jamie? You're the brave we couldn't be." Malcolm, ever the anchor, shuttled between hospital and home, stocking the fridge, fielding calls from Rita, who'd thawed into tentative olive branches, sending Jell-O molds and Hallmark cards that said, "Family first." One night, as Dad dozed, Malcolm and I stepped out for air, the parking lot a sea of slush under sodium glow. "If we go to Chicago," he said, breath fogging, "we take him with us. All of it." I nodded, tears freezing on my lashes. "Yeah, the whole messy load." Spring arrived stubborn, greening the banks as Dad mended. Physical therapy in the basement, Bryce spotting him on Walker laps like a drill sergeant gone soft. Malcolm and I scouted spots online. A two-bay garage in Wicker Park, affordable enough for our pooled savings, with a spare room for Uncle Bryce's visits. Dad, overhearing one call, just grunted approval. "As long as there's room for the Camaro." The unexpected came full circle on Memorial Day, the town decked in red, white, and blue, flags snapping from porches like defiant heartbeats. We gathered at the cemetery. Dad, Bryce, Malcolm, me at Mom's stone, overgrown with clover but etched clear. Evelyn Whitaker, beloved. Harlan knelt, placing a poppy from the VFW wreath, his voice steady. "She'd have loved you proud, Jamie. All of you." Bryce added a pebble from the Cuyahoga, symbol of the river that cleansed and scarred. Malcolm squeezed my hand, silent testimony. As we walked back, the sun breaking through clouds, I felt it, the humanistic pulse beneath the drama. Love not as perfection, but persistence. The straight father and uncle who'd shattered my world with their intrusion had rebuilt it with their unraveling, choosing vulnerability over victory. Betrayal had been the forge, conflict the hammer, but from the embers rose something enduring. A family reforged, not in secrecy, but in the open light of who we were. That summer, we loaded the U-Haul under a sky vast as promise. Dad in the cab with Malcolm, trading war stories and carb tips. Bryce tailing in his truck, radio blasting Born to Run like a send-off serenade. Elmwood shrank in the rear view, not abandoned but honored. A chapter closed with grace. Chicago waited, humming with horns and horizons. But the true north? That stayed with us. In the grip of a hand, the nod across a garage bay, the quiet choice to love wholly, without apology. And in the rear view, as the Rust Belt rolled by, I whispered thanks to the wind. For the unexpected, the shattering, the mending. Life changed that day in the garage. But the real miracle? We all walked out whole.